Far removed from the urban hustle, in a land where nights were cradled by the wind's song and far-off canine calls, dwelled Mark. Mark had always been in a struggle with the emotional load he carried. Sorrow draped his younger years in sadness. His father, a pillar of wisdom and righteousness, met his end in a land dispute. This event sowed within him seeds of anger and a longing beyond his world's confines. Endless dedication through the years provided the necessary means to break away. With a laden heart yet gaze locked on what lay ahead, he ventured towards the city's lights, a place radiating with vivid neons where skyscrapers touched the clouds, a beacon of newfound beginnings. Swept up by the city's luminous fervor and the relentless dance of opportunities, Mark was captivated by its glittering allure, diving into a myriad of jobs, yet caught in a vortex of reckless spending. In this realm of dreams and trials, peaks and shivers, Mark's most notable connection was with Pablo, a Mexican smuggler brimming with tales and dreams of wealth, harboring plans that stretched beyond the frontier. Stories and aspirations of opulence introduced Mark to an unimaginable sphere of opportunities. Under Pablo's influence and compelled by need, Mark yearned to launch his own venture. As his earnings quickly evaporated, he scarcely considered the repercussions of starting a Sensimilla cultivation business. His innate agricultural prowess ensured his plants were of exceptional quality, pushing him rapidly up the ladder in the local scene of illicit operations. In the way of the world, the brighter a light shines, the clearer the shadows it casts become. Mark's fame as Green Thumb spread swiftly, and before long, his naivety and unpreparedness for such a life led to his imprisonment. There, for the first time, he was introduced to hell. Abuse, violence, and threats. Years of torment filled his heart with hatred and remorse. Upon his release, Mark was merely a trace of the man who had once left the countryside. However, Mark's life, filled with abrupt shifts and turns, was about to twist again. Reflecting one night, he remembered his vow to a dear friend, to deliver a message he had left for his daughter, Julia. Clutching the worn piece of paper that held Julia's address, a memento he had safeguarded through the turmoil, Mark made his way to her doorstep. As he approached the address, heart racing with anticipation, Mark paused briefly at the door, gathering his thoughts. With a hesitant knock, he waited as the sound echoed through the silent hallway. The moment the door swung open and he laid eyes on her, something within him shifted. Her presence became Mark's redemption. Julia brought new purpose to Mark's life, and their friendship blossomed, compelling him to abandon his nefarious history for the purity of love. Yet venturing into this illegal life weaves its bonds tightly, making the exit fraught. While working, Mark was sought out by a sinister figure cloaked in power, offering an indecent proposal linked to his former life. Spurning the proposition, Mark found himself once again surrounded by danger, fearing the man's return. Distraught, Mark sought Pablo's help, who armed him with an M29 in exchange for certain services. Dragged back into the underworld, Mark now found himself working the streets for Pablo. His activity drew the loathing and wrath of Franklin, a powerful local drug dealer. As months went by, Franklin's menace grew. Mark never wished to fire the gun, however, the evening whispers heightened his unrest. Julia was his sole sanctuary. Yet a dark secret came to light, threatening their delicate peace. Through her words, Mark faced hell for the second time. Julia, burdened by a soul-deep remorse, confessed. She had been with Franklin, hinting that the child she was carrying might not be his. Hearing this, Mark's heart, already laced with deep scars, shattered under the betrayal's weight. The revelation set aflame a fury of revenge in Mark, leading him into solitude, where he pondered the gleam of the gun Pablo had given him, a harbinger of rough justice. Compelled by raw emotion, he headed into the fray. The once pulsating metropolitan streets now served as a backdrop for a showdown of agony. Franklin, lacking any semblance of honor and foreseeing the confrontation, preemptively ambushed Mark. With a cowardly bullet, he sent Mark to the ground, a move dictated by anticipation of his enemy's actions. As Mark lay fallen, he began to feel the metallic taste of blood rising in his throat, a stark reminder of the treachery that had struck him down. While Franklin gloated over his presumed victory, Julia arrived, yet she was consumed by guilt. She moved toward Mark, handing him the M29 that had slipped from his grasp. Gripping the gun as life ebbed from him, Mark, driven by a final burst of strength and will, confronted Franklin. "I'm still here, Franklin. Look at me." Pale-faced, he turned, and Mark, finger already on the trigger, fired 5 times at him. Franklin fell lifeless, taking with him a part of the pain Mark endured. Exhausted and fatally wounded, Mark simply closed his eyes, accepting the encroaching end. Julia, beholding the scene and the body of the man she loved and wronged lying bleeding, was swamped in a sea of guilt and pain. Ultimately, in a final act of despair and love, she finds a single bullet remaining in the M29. Unable to live with the burden of her actions, unable to bear the weight of her choices, she closes her eyes to join Mark in the same fate.